So then, Chesterfield's season is over, eliminated at the semi-final stage of the League Two playoffs at the hands of Walsall, losing 2-0 at home, 2-1 away, and of course that amounting to a 4-1 aggregate defeat. And having left a few days just to kind of digest the initial thoughts and feelings from that defeat, we're now going to take a look back at how things played out over the course of those two games, particularly from a Chesterfield perspective, but also more generally speaking as well. But just before we do that, just a massive thank you from myself for all the support on the content on this channel over the past kind of 2 or 3 months. It's been a very interesting and exciting time to watch and cover Chesterfield, and hopefully we managed to convey that with the videos on this channel. If you have enjoyed them and do go on to enjoy today's video, of course, any support would be massively appreciated. If you want to keep an eye on what I'm doing elsewhere, Twitter, TikTok, Blue Sky, all the links to those relevant social medias will be down in the description below, as they always are. But with that quick bit of admin out of the way, let's dive into taking a look at this playoff semi-final and how it played out. Just before we kind of really dive into things from a Chesterfield perspective, I do just want to give massive credit to Walsall, because all the talk heading into this, including on the preview we did on this channel, was how on earth were Walsall going to pick themselves up and go again after missing out on promotion, in automatic promotion at least, in such heartbreaking fashion. Of course, I'm sure the story has been told a million times now, and if you're on this video, you're probably already well aware. But just to quickly recap, Walsall, of course, runaway League Two leaders kind of at the midway point of the season. Looked like there was no way that they were going to miss out on the top three, but then things started to fall apart. Of course, Nathan Lowe being recalled midway through the season, that has been spoken about a million times before, whether it was that, whether it was something else, whether it was a mixture of several factors. Things just really fell apart for them in 2025, but it looked like they were going to rescue automatic promotion with a win on the final day of the season, only for Bradford City to score pretty much the last kick of their game against Fleetwood Town, sparking those crazy scenes of Valley Parade, and of course stealing away that final automatic promotion spot, and leaving Walsall having to go into the playoffs. And after all of that, of course, as we say, the big question was, how were they going to pick themselves up and go again? But they very much did here. They prepared themselves for a battle, they won that battle, and of course have booked their place at Wembley, and now after all of that may still get promoted if they can get past AFC Wimbledon in the League Two playoff final. So I did just want to kind of give them credit for that, because it's got to be immensely difficult to put all that emotion, all that disappointment out of the window, but it certainly looked like they did. They battled really hard here. They came for a battle. They executed their game plan, and you can't really begrudge them being the victor of this semi-final. Did just want to kind of get that out of the way before we go on to discussing all things Chesterfield, which we can now do. And when we did our preview there that I briefly mentioned for this playoff semi-final, there was we spoke about kind of two schools of thought in terms of Chesterfield's team selection, how they might go about it. Were they going to go for kind of the more settled kind of group of players that have kind of got that kind of late that run of late season form, that run of late season form to push them into the playoff places, of course, stealing away that 7th spot on the final day with a win at Accrington Stanley? Or would they try and incorporate some of the players that have been out for a little bit, the likes of Jack Sparks and Armando Dobra in particular, but also Ollie Banks and Paddy Madden as well, who missed those last couple of games or so. In the end, it was the former. They did kind of look to kind of keep things relatively settled. They kept in Lewis Gordon, they kept in Ryan Colclough rather than turning to kind of Jack Sparks and or Armando Dobra over on that left hand side. And that left us with the kind of lineup for Chesterfield going into that first leg. And as we kind of move into dissecting these games now, I think they really followed a pretty similar pattern, really, for the large part. Chesterfield dominating the ball, but Walsall quite happy to let that happen, to keep things, to stay relatively at the back, to keep things tight, and then look to profit in those transitional moments. And boy, did they at some points in the game. As we say, the big question was, particularly with the first leg in mind, how were Walsall going to come out of the blocks? And the answer was very quickly and very well. Pretty much from the opening kickoff, they kind of managed to fashion a chance that was saved by Ryan Boot. After that, Chesterfield did settle into the game and had a really good chance to take the lead through Ryan Colclough. And I think, looking back at this game, this is going to be one of the key themes that we probably keep returning to throughout this video, is that Chesterfield probably weren't a million miles off, and probably not quite as far off, at least, as a 3-goal margin over the two legs suggests, but they just didn't quite manage to drive things home in the big moments. This was definitely one of them. Colclough with a really good chance, well saved by Tommy Simpkin, who I thought was very, very impressive over the 2 legs. With his work in goal, managed to get that save, managed to keep it at 0-0. I think that was big, because if Chesterfield had got the opening goal, as we say, we've already gone over it, but kind of the struggles that Walsall had in the latter half of the season, had Chesterfield got themselves in front of a sellout crowd, would that have changed the dynamic and changed the complexion and given Walsall maybe another knock to their confidence? We'll never know, because Simpkin produced a save, it saved 0-0, and that gave Walsall the platform to then go on and score twice in what was really kind of the decisive kind of period of the game, you would have to say, because Walsall scoring twice in just over 10 minutes, that really changes the dynamic massively. It changes how the 2 sides can approach the remainder of the tie. Obviously, Chesterfield maybe having to, particularly as the second leg wore on and it was still 2-0, having to gamble that little bit more. Walsall being able to kind of sit back a little bit and be comfortable in that kind of deeper, kind of less possession-based kind of game plan that they had. And when you look at that, when you look at the goals that they scored in that period of the game, I think that comes down to where the game was really won and lost. And it was as I say, on balance, it wasn't a massively kind of one-sided game or anything like that. As we say, if anything, Chesterfield were merely controlling the flow of the game where possession was concerned, at least. But where the game was going to be won and lost was in those big battles and with those big kind of 1v1 individual duels, and Walsall were really able to profit from that. Of course, the big one, when you talk about the 2 goals that Walsall were able to score, was Liam Gordon, their left wing back, on the left hand side. Of course, drew the penalty, drew a foul from Liam Manderfield. The penalty then coolly converted by Taylor on, and then he put the ball across that was kind of half cleared, but only into the path of Alfie Chang, who absolutely lashed the ball home to make it 2-0. A very good finish there, and that kind of speaks to another battle area where Chesterfield maybe weren't quite able to be as solid or have as much success as they would have liked. And it was that battle in midfield we spoke about, really this being a problem in reference to the Bradford City game kind of a few weeks ago, where they were kind of not being able to track these kind of loose runners breaking deep from midfield. And it was, again, the issue with Chang kind of arriving late onto that cross, no one tracking him and giving that opportunity to score. They were punished for it in the Bradford game, they were punished for it again here. And this is what we'll probably kind of talk about this more in a later video, but as we look ahead to next season for Chesterfield, that's maybe something that they'll think about, I think, in terms of their recruitment, being able to kind of stand up in these kind of these big duels and these big kind of battles, which they unfortunately in this kind of stretch of the game weren't quite able to do. That put them in a very tough spot, being 2-0 down, and it gave Walsall that license, as we say, to continue sitting that little bit deeper, to kind of hold what they had and take a 2-goal lead back, to knowing that they had that home leg, of course, still in the bank as well. I think Chesterfield were maybe a little bit unlucky not to get a goal back in that second half, because, as we say, as much as Walsall were defending well, they were kind of happy to sit quite deep. They didn't completely shut the game down. Chesterfield definitely still had chances, but just couldn't quite convert. And as we say, just those big moments in the game and those big battles just not being won, unfortunately, by Chesterfield over the course of the game. The likes of Tommy Simpkin in goal for Walsall, standing up, producing saves when he needed to, ensuring that 2-goal margin remained in place going into the second leg, because Chesterfield did have some decent chances. I do think maybe 2-1 might have been a slightly little bit of a fairer reflection of how things played out in that first leg, but it wasn't to be. It remained 2-0 Walsall. And for the second leg, Chesterfield did opt to make some changes. They brought in Armando Dobra for Colclough. They brought in Ollie Banks as well. He also returned for Michael Olakigbe. And then they also decided to switch it up top as well, with Will Grigg dropping out for Bim Pepple. And in terms of what the thought process was, I think it comes back to what we just spoke about, really, that kind of midfield battle that Chesterfield maybe weren't necessarily completely winning, and definitely, of course, when we talk about that second Walsall goal in the first leg, they definitely were caught out a little bit there. So I wonder if bringing in the likes of Banks and Dobra was just a move to kind of try and tip that balance, or at least counteract that a little bit, because the last thing Chesterfield needed was to concede early in that second leg, because if it goes to 3-0, I think at that point you're relying on a bit of a miracle to get back in the game. So I wonder if the plan was to shore up that midfield area, to try and tip the balance a little bit more back in Chesterfield's favour, to play off Pepple, of course, a great physical outlet up there, to try and nick a goal maybe in that first hour or so, to reduce the deficit and then really push for things and really try and go for an equaliser kind of in that last half an hour or so. And it was a game plan that nearly worked, really, for Chesterfield, because, again, they maybe started a little bit slowly, Walsall having the better of the first 5 or 10 minutes, but again, they settled, they started to create chances in the first half, but once again, just when those big moments came, they just couldn't quite take them. And that's what it is. Because, again, I think a 4-1 scoreline, it suggests a bit of a walkover. I don't think it really was. But in these games where I know it's a two-legged game, but it's still essentially knockout football, you've got to stand up in those big moments. You're not kind of in a position where you're in a 46-game season, and over the course of things will level out, and you'll kind of end up where you're probably determined to be. The table doesn't lie, as Paul Cook has said numerous times, kind of in press conferences down this backstretch of the season. You're not in that situation. You're in 2 games, everything on the line, and you've got to take the chances when they come. You've got to stand up defensively in your battles when they emerge. And unfortunately for Chesterfield, they couldn't take a chance. They couldn't get a goal back in that first hour or so, and that meant that they really did have to throw pretty much everything at it in those final kind of portion, that kind of final half-hour period of the game. They brought Will Grigg on and went 2 up top, which is something we barely ever see from Chesterfield. They brought Ryan Colclough on. They brought Dylan Duffy on as kind of like a makeshift right-back. He's usually a winger, but they were just chucking all their attacking players out onto the pitch, trying to make things happen, trying to find a route back into the game. That, of course, then kind of really opened it up and gave Walsall that opportunity to kind of nick the 2 goals either side of, course, a consolation from Armando Dobra. And that was the tie, 4-1 Walsall. They advanced on to Wembley. Again, can't begrudge them it at all. But again, I think I will say, just to kind of close out the thoughts on the game, 4-1 I think was a little bit harsh. I think maybe 3-1 or 3-2 might have been a little bit of a fairer reflection, because, as we say, Chesterfield had a lot of play, but again, Walsall stood up really well in the big moments, in those individual battles when they needed their goalkeeper or certain players to stand up. They did, and then in transition they were also able to win some key individual battles as well and take their chances when they came. That is what really tipped the balance. And for that effort and for that kind of tactical nous to kind of stay compact, stay defensive, lure Chesterfield on, and then hit, I can't begrudge them winning the game at all, but I do think 4-1 was maybe a tad harsh on Chesterfield on the balance of things. But as we say, kind of that kind of vulnerability in those transitional moments, that inability maybe to fully drive home their kind of territorial and possession advantage, I'm sure those are all things that are going to be in Paul Cook's mind when he looks to kind of refresh this squad over the next few months and prepare for next season. But we are probably skipping a video or two rather into the future with that kind of chat, because I do kind of want to have, of course, this video focused on the playoff semi-final in particular. I want to kind of have a review of Chesterfield's season as a whole, and then kind of we're expecting the Chesterfield's retain list to drop kind of in the next kind of few days, or particularly within the next week or so, and then that will be a video in itself looking at who's staying, who's leaving, where it leaves Chesterfield's squad, and what kind of the potential is to kind of refresh the squad and retool as they look to go 1 or 2 better. And absolutely, you would think the goal has got to be promotion, or at least challenging for promotion out of League 2 next season. So all that to come. Of course, the season is over, but by no means is the content over. In fact, if anything, it's only just beginning with all the potential transfer possibilities. We've already maybe discussed a couple of names that Chesterfield might want to be looking at. If you want, again, there a plug for my Twitter. You'll have seen a couple of players that I've been speaking about over the past couple of days. So if you want to follow that, of course, as said at the start of this video, the links will be down in the description. But for now, that is it for this video. So again, one last congratulations to Walsall. Battled well, stood up in the big moments, took their chances when they needed to, and can't really begrudge them their place in the playoff final. And yeah, a tough one to take for Chesterfield, as I say, maybe a little bit hard done by, but if you don't take your chances, if you can't capitalise when you're on top, you always leave yourselves open, and they have learned that the hard way at this kind of business end of the season on this occasion. But as we say, overall a decent first season, but again, I do want to park that because we're getting into the next couple of videos to come, so I'm gonna be quiet now before I kind of spoil anything else. Thank you very, very much for watching this video. If you have enjoyed, of course, like, share, subscriptions, any form of support would be massively, massively appreciated. I will see you hopefully in the coming days with more content, and then looking ahead to what is a very exciting summer for Chesterfield. So thank you very, very much for watching this one, and hopefully see you again for all that to come. So thank you very much for watching. Goodbye.